rise of the sun in the morning light. Drums in the distance take the night. Feel the pulse of. Okay, for this wonderful conversation that we're going to have. So we're very excited to have you here. And then what I could say is that very simply. So this session, Africa Tech, talking about unlocking the future of Africa through technology, it's going to be one very interesting. So I am Tony Tiyou, founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa, and it is a pleasure to be moderating this conversation as part of Africa Awareness Week at Morehouse College. And before I begin, I want to give a special shout out to Next to Africa for their support in helping organize this session, but also making conversation like this very much possible. So I want to start by a simple but very important question, which is, according to you, what is really AfriTech? Yeah, that's a question. So it's not just about startups but it's also about how technology is being used across the continent of Africa to solve real but also everyday challenges, from access to healthcare, to finance, to education, and also infrastructure. And why does Africa Tech Future matter now? It's because we're very much at a unique moment. So Africa is not burdened by legacy system in the same way that we see in other regions. And it actually creates an opportunity to leapfrog and to build smarter, faster, and also more inclusive system from the ground up. Here is actually the shifts we need to focus on today. It's moving from simply using technology to solve local problems to building solutions in Africa that will scale or that can scale globally. Not just consumers of innovation, but also creators, owners, and also exporters of it. And that's exactly what I like the conversation today to be about, and look at how Africa can move from potential to execution and from execution to leadership. And I thought before we kickstart the conversation, so I'd like to talk to one of our panelists, probably the youngest panelist in here, and because I'd like him to introduce himself and maybe describe to us what he has been doing with his company in the continent of Africa. Uchenna, can you hear me? If yes, excellent, I can see that. Thank you for flashing your camera. So if you can briefly just introduce who you are, Uchenna, and give us a little bit of understanding what your company is doing. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tony. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Go for it. Yeah. Uchenna, it looks like your camera is not. So what I do, I will come back to you. Just hold on what you wanted to say. So I will come back to you in about a couple of minutes, but maybe give the chance to our four panelists to very briefly introduce themselves. And after that, we'll come back to Uchenna, hopefully by then, so your network will be much more stable. So let me start by you, Alex.
Yes, thank you so very much, Tony. My name is Alexander Sado. I've lived on both sides of the world half my life, actually. Grew up in Nigeria for a very long time, then moved to New York and Oakland, California now. I'm a technologist. I'm a GPU guy. Worked at NVIDIA from the very, very early days, 2016, and was a product manager. I led the deployment of cloud, or the very first cloud GPUs. So if you use GPUs on the cloud, AWS, Google Cloud, those are my babies, and we're always very happy to bring them into this kind of conversation where we think about how do you use GPUs to customize and tailor AI solutions that work for people that look like us. So happy to be here.
I'll move to you, Adi, if you can go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm guessing good evening to those on the motherland. I go by Ade Ekunle Fofu. Born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, last 20 years now. I lead large-scale infrastructure and data programs at Meta. I'm also the founder of Foster, which is a global community for Africans and allies in big tech and startups. My work is at the intersection of data, systems, and people, because I feel that AI doesn't scale on models alone. It scales on the quality of data, the strength of the ecosystem, and lastly, the movement of talent. So excited to explore how Africa can not just adopt AI, but hopefully shape it in its own context. Happy to be here.
Much appreciated. So I have you, Kayan, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Keon Williams. I am an enterprise risk management person with a significant background in work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The work that I do primarily focuses on protecting enterprise value where risk and growth intersect. And so while I have a technology background, most of my contributions will be based on governance and management of enterprise risk.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Tony, and everyone for inviting me. I feel like an old person out. My field is international politics. I'm currently professor of political science, but prior to this, I served as associate provost for global strategies and international affairs at the Ohio State University, and also the founding vice provost of international affairs at the University of California, Riverside.
Excellent. So I'm just going to come back to you, Uchenna. So Uchenna, have you been able to stabilize your network? If yes, I'd like to come back to you and give you a couple of minutes to tell us who you are and what you do.
Yes, sorry about that. All is good now. I'd love to come back.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So yes, I'm Uchenna Ngubane. I'm actually 19 from Durban, South Africa. So I'm the founder and CEO of Morehouse Nexus. We basically created a platform which connects AI developers across Africa with enterprises who are looking to implement AI into their workflows, which spans from different sectors, from agriculture, healthcare, education, manufacturing, solar energy, and fintech. So we've created a system where it does not filter out those who have been not given an opportunity to be able to go to perhaps a good school, or give it the ability to get an opportunity to actually be put out there. Right now, it's no more really based on a sense where you have to go to a school specifically to get certain skills. A lot of now people who are younger are able to actually get skills just online and being able to actually boot camp themselves and learn their skills. So it's unfair to not give those an opportunity too, whereas that's now the vast majority. So we've created a platform that doesn't filter out based on what school you went to or what university. If you say you can code, then prove it. And that's the platform we created. And if you're able to prove it, you then get matched to clients that are looking to implement AI solutions.
Okay, excellent for that. So this is the platform of Uchenna Nexus. So as you can see, you could have an idea of the services that it provides in here. He built already this platform. I understand there's more than 500 people, 500 developers on the platform. So waiting to serve people from various industries. And the industry I know is very interested by fintech, but there's also other sectors I believe that they're happy to tackle. I'm sure you can learn a lot more. And as far as I know, the platform is currently live and they're working on a couple of live projects as well. So yeah, so I think that's why it's good to encourage our local talent. Now, jump into the conversation now. I want to kickstart the first block of questions that we have. So I'd like to talk to you, Keon, for a very simple reason. Is the fact that I know that you've had a quite extensive and rich experience with CDC in the US. And I want to understand how AI is actually transforming healthcare system globally. And is there any lesson that the continent of Africa can actually pick up from that? So maybe you want to give us a sense of where we are.
Sure. I think there are a couple of things that people need to realize, and this is not exclusive to the CDC, so everybody will be able to benefit from it. But I've seen in many cases in a healthcare or a public health application that organizations are adopting artificial intelligence without a plan and then hoping that the artificial intelligence produces an amazing outcome. One of the things that we learned at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention was that the design of the system has a significant impact on the outcome that the system produces. And so as we think about the growth of health tech across the African continent and for the diaspora around the world, it becomes very important that the quality of the outcomes and the decisions that are produced are trustworthy, reliable, and safe. If we keep trustworthy, reliable, and safe in mind, whether it's artificial intelligence, or it's cloud adoption, or it's data governance, or it's regulatory compliance, all of those things fundamentally require that the health tech organization say, what is the system supposed to do? What are the boundaries within which the system is supposed to operate to make sure that the stakeholders are safe, to make sure that the health information is accurate and reliable, and to make sure that the data isn't compromised to the extent that people are going to be harmed. What that leads to is a couple of decisions that are prerequisite for artificial intelligence that come down to what's your technology stack? What is the infrastructure you're going to build the system on top of? How resilient is that infrastructure? And then you also have to think about information governance. How are records created? How are they shared with people? How do you ensure that the right information is shared with the right people at the right time? And then when the information is no longer required, how do you dispose of that information to make sure that the patient, who is ultimately the person we're serving in health information technology, doesn't have their data compromised and isn't harmed? If we do this well, then what ends up happening is that your AI adoption is easy because you've clearly identified where is AI going to add benefit, where is it going to have no impact, or where is it going to cause the system to perform in an unreliable way. And then we can wisely invest only in the AI solutions that are going to enhance the process that delivers value to the patients that we're serving.
And as you were laying out some of those key lessons that you picked up there, I was wondering, and I would turn towards you, Alex. So from an AI infrastructure perspective, what would you say it takes to actually build an healthcare-focused AI solution in Africa?
Conceptually, those are steps you need to take. Then bringing it to the actual operations or engineering side of things, you need a lot of data. That is basically understanding of what's been happening. And let me use an actual example. There was a group we're working with in Zimbabwe that has been collecting a lot of data. Data looks like scans of MRI images or ultrasound scan images of people in Zimbabwe, mostly women who have cervical cancer, right? They've taken the scans over a very long time. You have radiologists who are identifying this is where the cancer is. They label it. So you label hundreds, if not thousands of those images. Now you want to teach an AI how to understand. To do that, your regular computer cannot do it. The data is too heavy for your computer. So it goes too slow. It doesn't even work. If you try it, you will wait for 2 weeks. Nothing is happening. Sometimes there will be smoke and your computer can burn down. So like literally this is the issue. And today in Africa, that's what's happening almost everywhere. And it's also happening in America where a lot of our universities face the same issues, especially the HBCUs face that issue. So now that group in Zimbabwe, we've been able to work to get them access to some GPUs so that they can process those data they have to create an AI model that can automatically detect cancer earlier. Before, the humans used to only detect it by level stage 3 or 4, when the person chance of dying is like 60%. But now they can detect it earlier, stage 1 or 2, where the person has a better chance at life. So that's what can happen when you bring data, talent, and GPU computing or supercomputers to the equation.
Yeah, excellent. And you insist on the importance of data here, the role of data, which is a question that I was going to direct to Ade, but you kind of really extensively explain how important it is to have enough information, insight to those data. But question I'm just going to turn to you, Ade, is to say, so according to you, how could we actually ensure that those AI models are culturally and contextually relevant to African population? Because what we have right now is we know that it's difficult to create data in the continent in general, right? Across sectors. But most of the time, those models that we see, you can even see that sometimes when you're looking to get an avatar about certain things, come up with a white person. Nothing wrong against that. It's just like it doesn't always reflect on, obviously, people of different color, especially Africans. So how can we make sure that those models will culturally and contextually be relevant to Africa, according to you?
I think to Alex's point, I think data is the foundation, but not all data is equal, right? I think in many African healthcare systems, the challenge isn't just the lack of data, but I think most of the time the data is either fragmented, is inconsistent, and oftentimes, I think to Alex's point, not digitized. So 3 things in my mind actually happen. The first is availability. Okay, can we actually access reliable data? I think number 2 would be the quality, right? Is that data in itself, is it structured? Is it labeled? Again, going back to what Alex said, and is it representative in whole? And then lastly, in terms of ownership, who controls it and who benefits from it, right? In my opinion, if we don't get this right, we risk building AI systems where it works everywhere else, but actually fails locally. So I think for us, the opportunity isn't to just leapfrog, but how can we build data systems that are interoperable and obviously with privacy first, and that is obviously locally governed too. Because in healthcare, bad data doesn't just mean bad predictions. It actually has real world consequences, in most cases, life or death.
Yes, absolutely. It's very crucial. And you talked a lot about some of those guardrails that we need to have around AI in order for us to make sure that it does serve people as opposed to the opposite. So, Professor Kelechi, let me just bring you back in here. So, what policy or governance framework would you say are needed for AI adoption in healthcare across Africa?
Let me make a background comment. I generally don't like to talk about Africa. Africa is so huge, so fragmented, linguistically, geographically, politically, ideologically, you name it. So speaking as if we are talking about a unified framework on which we can build policy, we need to take a step back and think more in terms of countries and perhaps regionally. I think I have a problem with that. The problem is this: technology is an idea. Technology is an idea. AI is a product of an idea. If we leapfrog with AI, whoever owns the idea will continue to make us dependent on them. Essentially, leapfrogging makes one subordinate to the source of ideas. So to answer your question directly, my colleagues and young brothers have spoken already about questions of data integrity, issues of privacy, potential privacy violation, issues of potential physical harm to patients. AI is wonderful, don't get me wrong. It can dissect my data and give you exactly what you're looking for, faster than 100 well-trained humans will not be able to. In radiology, for example, it can help. In terms of diagnostic approaches, AI is wonderful. So what policies do we need to get to policy, which is really the governance framework on which users and end users of AI will depend on? You need a government that is stable, that is clear-headed in terms of its goal. Is the goal of the government to ensure that the people are healthy? If the goal is to ensure they are healthy, are the government officials themselves subject their families to the healthcare systems in various countries in the continent? So the first policy is a policy around medical education and digitalization of information across board. Because if the doctors we are training, the nurses, the pharmacists, the people on the ground, if they are not knowledgeable about us and align that with what AI can be used for, no policy is going to take us from point A to point B. It won't. Rwanda is doing fantastic work, but they have the coding academy. I visited there last summer. They are still dependent on the ideas coming from Silicon Valley and from China. I want a policy that indigenizes the knowledge production, because our health is what determines our future.
I come back to you, Alex, right? And because I know you've had a chance to work with one of the trailblazer in the sector, NVIDIA. So I'm sure many people would have liked to have your experience. So you probably have seen the very advanced model, or at least what is coming up. You have a better idea than the average people. So would you say that based on that, Africa is truly behind in AI, or is it building differently? And what would you call an African approach to AI looking like?
Yeah, as of today, Africa, yes, by several objective measures, Africa, yes, is very behind when it comes to AI. And then the second thing I would say is to catch up, or we'll probably need to do things differently if we really want to attempt to catch up, or I don't even like catching up. It's not a race. How do we leverage this tool to do something, right? And for me, I care about improving life. How do you leverage this tool to improve the quality of life for people as against trying to catch up? And to do that, think in terms of first principles. What situation are you starting from? What resources do you have? And how do you build around those resources? In America came to a place around 2017. America had a lot of money. Like from NVIDIA, we used to work with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense. They had hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they designed AI around a hundreds of millions of dollar strategy where you build very large GPU clusters, which people call supercomputers, and that require a lot of energy. And they build these very big systems that can crunch a very big amount of data. Africa, on the other hand, today is coming from a place where there's no hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on this infrastructure. The energy is not in gigawatt scale. It's not very big. So can we think about small kind of AI solutions that can also still improve life? The answer is yes. Our people have been thinking about this from the likes of 2018. There was a conference called Deep Learning in Daba that will bring together the smartest Africans together. In 2017, it was 250. In the next year was 500. It has been increasing, but now it's 1,200 people that go every single year that know AI really well. They have research they've done. Some of them are thinking about applications. It fits African space in terms of the size, the energy, the internet. But just meetings like this help because they bring more minds together and hopefully bring more resources together. Because I'll stop here. What has been missing is really GPUs. It's the fast computers. The great minds are there. The data is not a problem. Data is a problem when you want to do something very big. But if you're doing something small, people have gathered the data already for the past 6 years. There's data on language, there's data on genomics, there's data on image. We as a company, we have access to that data. What has been missing is resources for getting small GPUs or large supercomputers. Like I'm excited Morehouse will have one soon. That supercomputer is very important to bring it towards people who have data and the talent so we can build AI solutions that match us, right? Not that we're trying to catch up with OpenAI and ChatGPT. That's impossible. Yep.
Excellent. So you clearly have highlighted that we need resources, right, to play, let's say, a better game. So at least in this industry, because you sort of forbidding us to use the word catching up. So we need resources, technical resources, human capital resources, but also money. Eddie, according to you, concretely, what measures can the diaspora take to contribute meaningfully to Africa tech growth? Obviously, Alex have laid out the missing links, the missing ingredients. So how can we concretely do? What can we concretely do? Could you, Atlanta, which is known to be like a very, let's say, advanced city in terms of Black emergence. So you probably have an idea what we could do.
Yeah. I think Alex touched on resources such as GPUs, right? I think for me, diaspora talent is probably one of Africans' most under-leveraged assets. And I think the value goes just beyond capital. I think it's about what I call the, capability transfer and ecosystem acceleration. And I think three things actually show up. Number one is knowledge, where we're bringing global best practices. Hey, I'm based in Atlanta, work had access to work with amazing companies over the years. Alex has done the same. And so imagine if we can bring those global practices back home to help build the capability back home too. I think number 2 would be access, being able to like open doors to network and markets. And then number 3 would be education, where we can actually build and not just advice from afar, right? But here's also the shift. I think we should obviously move away from just brain drain to brain circulation, where we're not just sending money back home. Because I remember back, like there was all about money remittance, right? Money remittance. We need to move into a new phase, which is more or less talent remittance. And hopefully African and the African countries also see those in the diaspora as a natural extension to the motherland, because I think it takes 2 to build these structured pathways for collaboration and co-building together. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why I founded Foster, so we can make those connections intentional and not accidental.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So, Kian, so we know Africa has a tech space. So we've got to places like South Africa, so Joburg, Cape Town, so Nairobi, certainly Lagos for sure. But what we're missing at times is scale, because if you don't play a big enough game, so in this global world, so I think especially when you fighting giants like the US, Europe, China, clearly you're always going to be on the back foot. So what foundational system would you say must be in place in the continent for us to scale sustainably?
This is probably going to sound like a crazy answer, but the foundational system is access to water. And so one of the things that you find, if you look at infrastructure, if I'm going to restrain myself, when you look at the regional hubs where we have AI data centers in the continents of Africa, they're primarily in Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. And all of those places have ready access to water. And so if we have regions of the continent where we want to apply the professor's recommendation and get specific, some places don't have the same water that other places have, which is going to be a constraint that needs to be overcome. In 2022, Google used 6.4 billion gallons of water in their data centers. Microsoft used 1.7 billion gallons of water in their data centers. And the primary use of water falls into 2 categories. One, if I'm training models, it generates a lot of heat, and evaporation cools technology infrastructure, which then allows the infrastructure to not melt down and turn into a pile of molten metal in the bottom of the data center. And so when we really talk about infrastructure in the continent of Africa, what we have to think about are, what is the right use of natural resources? What does the industrial and automation control system education system look like? Because a data center requires different academic background and experience than somebody that is building just a computer system or doing programming. And what it highlights is that the infrastructure that's necessary for success, even if we have smaller data centers in specific countries in the African continent, we still have to have an education in industrial and automation control systems, operational technology, critical infrastructure, water conservation, before we even start talking about the education that's required to have creative ideas that you realize in systems that are designed and programmed and delivered to produce the outcomes that we're talking about. Now, we're talking about healthcare specifically, but generally what happens with a artificial intelligence system or a data center is that it's multi-purpose. And now, given all of those things being solved as problems, how do we identify the right use cases? How do we have ethics and accountability and traceability in the systems that we're building? And how do we make sure that the AI systems are solving real problems in society that matter, rather than being able to do AI prompts so that I could create cartoons and funny pictures that are not going to save people's lives and don't matter in the scheme of eternity? And so I assume that you were expecting a different answer, but the critical infrastructure and the underlying things have to be answered first before we can really start thinking about systems. And if we apply Professor Kalu's wisdom to the conversation, some of those limitations are going to prevent entire nations or entire parts of the continent from participating in this. And then we have to think about, how do we democratize and distribute the infrastructure on the African continent for different people who have different priorities, different backgrounds, different perspectives, even if they all look the same on the outside, there are going to be national drivers and political drivers and tribe drivers and other things that influence how different groups are going to use the technology. And those things have to be part of the policy discussion and the infrastructure conversation and how the resources are going to be used to benefit as many people as possible.
That's great. And I can confirm to you that effectively, I was expecting a different answer. But that's what is brilliant about those conversations, because you actually brought it down to the very simple and elemental, basic point, which is obviously access to natural resources and utilization of natural resources, because there comes the dilemma. When you have water, so are you going to use it for your digital transformation, or are you going to use it to give access to clean water to everybody in the continent, which we know is not what's happening at the moment, both for water, but also energy. So should we then say that in Africa, we're not ready for a rapid digital transformation, Professor?
Thank you very much. Rapid digital transformation. Let me go back just 1 second to Kayan's comments about countries, etc. To suggest simply, don't forget Cape Verde. Cape Verde sits in the Central Atlantic Ocean. That could be a hub for hosting any kind of digital station that can help, especially West Africa. In terms of rapid transformation, we are not ready. The reason we are not ready is because we haven't built the institutional infrastructure across countries, regions that will help us. I'm using your word, Africa, to transform digitally. We haven't built that infrastructure. East Africa, Southern Africa, they're doing a good job coordinating. West Africa, the ECOWAS, we are okay, but fragmented at the moment. You have better coordination in the North Africa region, mostly aligned with the Middle East. And so if we are thinking about rapid transformation, go back to very basic framework. Technology is an idea. Ideas come from formal and informal educational systems. Our educational systems in many African countries are fragmented. In large countries like Nigeria, you have mostly private universities, private secondary schools, with massive underfunded public high school, K through 12. Those are the places where you plant the ideas that will help you with transformation. Any idea you impose from above is not going to, as quickly as possible, transform the whole society. It might transform some metropolitan areas. But I'm thinking about the whole country, the whole region, and the continent, as it were. I'm ashamed to say many of our institutions across Africa still maintain the colonial curricula that were imported prior to independence. Many of our languages are dying. What is the relevance of language? You all are the tech folks, right? Large language models, and what are we talking about in terms of AI? Machines that can learn, that can make decisions, that can do the things that humans are capable of doing, but do them faster and hopefully more efficiently. Are they also humane? What languages are you training the AIs to think and reproduce or make decisions in? Are those languages going to be able to help the person, say, in Togo, in Guinea-Bissau, to be able to understand the decision making that goes into their health? If the language remains French, English, and Portuguese, basic, you young people are very brilliant. Finding ways of starting slow, as Alex Sado said. I don't want us to catch up. Embed what you have within the infrastructure at home and let it grow from there. That's where we can transform. Right now, we are constantly running behind because we haven't allowed our own ideas to drive our policies. Let me stop for that at this point.
I think I'm really enjoying your answer, Professor, right? Because you even made me laugh because you said that what language the model is speaking? French and English. I'm going to start thinking. So what would it be like if I get a model speaking Bafang, which is my own language, and ask my grandmother to come and help me train this model? That's just the image of that made me laugh, right? Let me just move to the third block of questions, and we're just going to finish off our conversation here. I know time is actually running out quickly. So I'll ask you, if you don't mind, to make sure that we have succinct answers so that we can get all of you speaking. So I start with you again, Alex. Professor said that we're not ready, at least for the big digital transformation. Yeah. So how do we move from Africa consuming technology to building and owning it, especially in AI? Professor has already given us an idea what we need to be moving towards instead of challenging younger folks like you guys or us also to do it. So how do we do it? How do we move from consuming technology to building on it?
Yeah, so Professor is correct. In terms of the big scene, it's difficult to just jump into it. But the beautiful thing is it's already begun. It's already begun with, there's some of this, there's a lot of us, I'm sure all of us on this call, we've been working on this for the last 8 years. So we didn't just start trying to catch up on AI. We've been working on this for a very long time. And there's been a lot of progress. There's been a lot of progress that will shock a lot of people who are not involved. On the talent side, when I left NVIDIA, we looked at data, talent, GPUs, which is compute, and policy. On the talent side, at that time, there weren't a lot of people in Africa who could build AI models. So we found partners around who were working on that problem. The one we latched in on is something called Zindi. We started working with them. Today, when I ask this question a lot, how many people do you think are Zindi, i.e. African data scientists who are building AI models? Everybody gets it wrong. Nobody comes close. It's now almost 100,000 people. People say 100, 800, 5,000. It's 100, almost 100,000 people. And this morning I was having a meeting with senior people in Sierra Leone, and they were like, yeah, I'm sure we don't have people in our country that can do AI. I just typed Zindi, Sierra Leone. I pulled the top 10 names and gave them. Go and talk to those people, they can build. So you have your talent. Data, there are several groups that are also gathering data that is happening. I'm very excited about image data. There's a guy I've just met called Malika Febua in Nigeria, who's gathering data on the way we look and using it to tell historical stories of the past. So that when Google, you ask it for a picture of yourself, it won't say that you're Tony Tiyou is a white guy. You're not a white guy, man. You look the way you look. And you need the data of us to do that. So we already have Africa GPU Hub. We connect GPUs that are available in Africa today under one platform, so you can access it, and mostly a lot cheaper than anywhere else. So if you're a builder, reach out to us and build.
And in terms of talent, our Wayface company is definitely contributing to close this gap. Adi, so how do we build but also retain world-class tech talent across Africa?
I think increasingly with this conversation, I think it's clear that talent is not necessarily the problem, right? I think Professor Carlin alluded to it. I think Alex also alluded to it too, right? I would say environment is. I think we lose talent not because people lack the ability, I would say, but because they lack access to solving real problems, exposure to global standards, and ecosystems that actually compound growth. I think the focus should be on exposure, environment, and opportunity, and especially ownership too, right? Because people stay where they can build, right? I know one of the reasons why I left the continent was because I wanted global exposure. I wanted access to infrastructure and obviously to give myself a better life. But I would love to stay and build in the continent of Africa. And speaking of retention, I think retention doesn't necessarily mean staying in one place. I think we can actually create systems where talents can actually move globally and still contribute locally. And I think that's how we build the talent flywheel. So I don't think really talent is a problem any longer. I think just creating that environment that keeps talent grounded is.
So any advice you would give to founders building tech solutions in Africa especially in high-risk sectors like AI?
I had a flashback to the pandemic, so I wanted to make sure you guys said that I was on mute. But I am the founder of technology. I just happen to be based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States instead of Africa. I didn't create the technology that I'm using, but my ownership of the intellectual property that I build on top of that technology becomes very important. And so for the founders that are building things, we've already talked about the problem of building data centers in different parts of Africa and some of the limitations with natural resources. But if I'm not even in Johannesburg, but out in the middle of nowhere, South Africa, and I have high-speed internet and I can access resources in the cloud, well, I still have a responsibility to understand intellectual property, what is eligible for a patent, so that I can ensure that I maintain ownership of the things that I create, even if I created new things on top of technology that I didn't build. If you think about software licensing, that's a good example. Most of the people that use a integrated development engine, they didn't develop the IDE, they wrote the code. And then the code that they created produces an outcome that's unique that they can own. There's nothing that stops maximum level of ownership for everything that people across the African continent create. We just need to make sure that on the educational side, what is eligible for a trademark, what's eligible for a copyright, what's eligible for a patent, and then make sure that those founders are filing the paperwork so that they always own what they've created, which then causes people to have to license their technology or give their permission to use what they've created, which then creates value for those individuals, the people that work for them, and the communities that they live in.
So, Professor, I'm just going to come to you, but I'm sad to say you're not going to be the one closing because I want to leave, obviously, a young man with China to do it. But again, I just have a 3-minute left, but still, I just want to find out from you, what is the single most important shift Africa must make to unlock the technological future that's ahead of us?
It's something actually that is doable, and that is the government needs to ensure that the institutions, i.e. the rules, the organizations, incentives, and people have the capability to translate ideas into products. Those institutions support the people, connect with educational systems, educational infrastructure. Make sure you explore the talent in a fruitful, productive way. Bring them to help you. When that mindset shifts, where you are not seeing that spry individuals as people coming to disturb what you're doing at home, when you change the infrastructure, the system and institution to be enabling for creation of ideas, and you make sure that the rule of law operates effectively. Okay, we don't lack talent. What they need is that space. The rules clear and accountability structure very clear. When you have that, we can compete with anyone. Trust me. I've seen it across the world. Africans are everywhere, and they're doing great things. Our hometowns, our home countries need to create an enabling platform where those talents can come together and help with the transformation. Thank you.
So, Chin, I'm just going to wrap up with you. So just a very quick question and short answer, because I think it's time for us to wrap up. What will define Africa Tech success by 2030, according to you?
All right. Honestly, I could not agree more. Just to start with what Mr. Kelechi was saying in regards to actually just giving an opportunity for the younger people. But just to touch base on what you are saying, I think in the next 20 years, it would be great to have an African continent where we are actually able to create our own systems and build them on our own, not in a situation where it is always a matter of having to outsource data or even outsource individuals. Because like Mr. Kelechi says, we do have talent across Africa. On a yearly basis, at least 600,000 developers graduate, yet 45% never work in tech. So the issue was never with a matter of developers, but creating an opportunity or a platform where we can give them the opportunity to showcase their skills.
Anyway, we're coming toward the end of our conversation. I know it's already almost an hour. So as we wrap up, so I just want to take the time to thank all our panelists today for really, I would call it, powerful, insightful discussion that we've had. So what I have heard today, so makes one thing very clear is like Africa technology future is not about catching up, definitely not, right? So it's about defining new pathways, but that future will not build itself by adoption alone. So the key message in here I'm hearing is that Africa must build, not just adopt. So we need to have the right infrastructure. We need to make sure that we give opportunity to our talents. We need to build the companies. And ultimately, we need to build also the ownership. But because at the end of the day, the technology is not just about the system, it's also about people. So AI and innovation, not just going to create value, but it's going to save life. It's going to expand access and transform society altogether. So it's about collaboration for us, it's about execution, and it's about ownership. So we want government, founders, investors, institutions, all have a role to play in here. But more importantly, what I would say is the next generation that Uchenna was representing here has a role to play. And AfriTech's story, it's just been written, in front of our eyes. And many of you, I'm sure, will be the one writing it. So looking forward to have you as our next guest for a panel maybe next year. Yeah. Thank you for being part of the conversation. And thank you again for everybody. Pleasure.
Think so.
Just going to finish as we started with some nice music.